Hey everybody, welcome into this edition of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with CPA and personal financial specialist Phil Putney. I'm your co-host Mark Killian. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome into this edition of Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts. We appreciate your time as Phil and I are talking investing, finance, and retirement. That's Phil Putney. I'm Mark Killian. Appreciate you as we're chatting this week about being a genius. So, feel like we can cover that, Phil. We're geniuses, right?
Yeah, absolutely. At least we can claim that.
At least
no one knows the difference.
I don't know a genius at what, but something. So, we've all heard this saying many times, that about geniuses and how we try to learn from them. So there's some books out there, Investing Like a Genius, things of that nature. So I thought that'd be kind of a fun topic this week for us to talk about and kind of get into it. We're always studying folks that are highly intelligent and trying to follow these different things. So I basically have three. I have basically three of the main kind of tenets, if you will, from that. So I thought we'd just dive in and chat about them a little bit. Geniuses are highly adaptable, right? We know that.
They have to be.
They have to be. And so one of the things we talk about often is how do we adapt from a situation? So from a financial standpoint, how do we adapt? 2008, 2008-9, what did we learn and did we adapt moving forward so that we didn't get caught again, for example?
Right.
Well, COVID comes around.
Here we are again. Didn't think we'd be there,
right?
But
did you learn? Right? Did the person listening to this, watching this, did you learn anything? From because maybe you were 40. Let's say you were 40, 45, 50 in 08. Well, now you're at retirement age, right? Now you're 60. 10 years later, 45 or 55, 60, whatever the case is. Did you learn something? How do we adapt?
Right. Well, and you're at a different stage of life too. Maybe when you went through it the last time, although it wasn't fun, you realize that, I've got, 15 years. I'm just not looking at my statements. It's okay. It's going to come back.
Right.
It always has. And it did, so if you didn't touch the money, it didn't affect you. And in the long run, It was very painful. And, going through that volatility, you didn't know for sure what was happening, where the bottom was. But yeah, that's just one example, but you've got to have some flexibility in your scenario, because history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes, they say. So we don't have exactly the same thing, but the reality is, markets move in cycles, things like this happen, and you've got to, and that's just one aspect of it. It's a plan in general, and that's really, again, and we talk about it all the time, but that's where it starts. You have to have a plan. Does everything work? And I encourage you when you're building that to put in all the different things that you'd like to see, does it work? I want to do all these extras, but then also stress test it.
Yeah.
For those events like a 2008, like a spouse passing or needing long-term care, all the other events that are never fun to go through, highly probable that, you will experience them, but you've got to make sure your plan is flexible enough to handle that.
Well, so flexibility, I think, is a great word to use there, adaptability and flexibility, because we've got to be able to roll with some of the punches. And even if you want to, look on the rosier side of things and say, it's going to be smooth sailing, there's always going to be a little something. And so your plan has to be able to adapt. You have to be able to adapt in order to adjust with the ebb and flow of, something that, the grandkids might need or want. And then you decide you want to do it. That could come out of the blue. I mean, you just never really know. It doesn't have to be anything, I guess, as life-altering as COVID might have been, but it certainly could just be the grandkids saying, "I really want this," and you just want to be cool, grandma or grandpa, and get it.
Right. Yeah, and one thing I always see clients do is they'll plan to spend every dime. Run the math. Oh yeah, if I lived at 85, I've spent everything.
Right.
And that's great, but you're probably using just a flat return, which is not going to happen. And if returns don't happen the right way. Did you build in inflation to your expending number?
Yeah.
There's a big part of it. You got to build that in. And what about these extras? You said, I'm only going to need, $5,000 a month. But the reality is when you look at your spending, you're spending 6, 7, 8. And that doesn't count the extras because now you got grandkids. And so you've got to have some flexibility and some wiggle room, so to speak, in the plan. It can't be budgeted out so tightly that this is it, But,
and hopefully most people get that, but you're right. There are folks out there who think, and it probably is because they're erring on the side of, well, I don't think I have enough. So if I budget really, really tightly, or if I think about it, if I keep it really close to the vest, we'll be able to get through it,
Right.
And you're not really looking at the funner side of things, and you're thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to have any fun, and nobody wants that in retirement. So again, you want to be flexible and adaptable, and going into that. So can we learn from geniuses? How do we invest like a genius, if you will? And that's a first step. Be flexible, be adaptable. All right, number 2. They understand often what they do not know. Some of the smartest people out there, right? People, a lot of times we'll look at Steve Jobs, right? So a lot of times people say, oh, he was a genius and this, that, and the other. But you don't think that he came up with every single invention and every single idea. He might have had a thought and said, hey, how do we make this happen? Because I don't know how to make it happen. So figure it out.
There's a team behind him somewhere that's doing a lot of the legwork. And, he's maybe at the helm of the ship, giving the direction and saying, hey, we want to go here and do this. This is a great idea. And I'll make it happen.
Right.
And working through that. But yeah, they often rely on other individuals, that team behind them. In retirement's no different. I mean, unfortunately, it's one of those things that I think often gets presented that, oh, you can do it yourself. It's pretty easy, right? I mean, it's just investing. I know all those free calculators out there. You don't need to talk to somebody about Social Security. Just go to the Social Security website and run the numbers.
Right.
You want to run a quick math scenario. Do I have enough? Well, there's thousands of calculators out there that are free. They can run that.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's all these other little pieces that those calculators aren't going to talk to you about. How does taxes look? Have you figured that out? How does that affect your scenario? And the surviving spouse scenarios. And I mean, there's all these different pieces you have to build in, markets. And, so having that outside source, somebody to deal with, a coach, so to speak.
Yeah, same helps. Thing. Yeah. Well, we talked about it before. So at the time that we're taping this podcast, the guys are going to come out and tear my deck down. So I'm finally getting a new deck put together. And my brother's been hounding me for weeks. He's like, come on, we bought the table saw and we have this, that, and the other. We can do it. We can make it ourselves. And so we start doing a little research. And the more we get into it, I'm like, no.
I'm not going to do that.
I am not going to do that, because it's not, and then I finally got him to come around to my way of thinking. And it was like, look, if we were making maybe a really simplistic deck, maybe I would say, to your point about the DIY for retirement, maybe, just maybe, if it was really, really, really simple, but we want something a little bit more complicated. We want a roof on the top of it, so on and so forth. And that's just more than, I've got to deal with footers and, I'm like, that's just out of my wheelhouse. Same thing to your point with retirement. If it was super, super simple, maybe the DIY approach can work. And for some folks it does. But then you start talking about Social Security, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, all the different pieces. And if you love it, I mean, some people, that is what they love, getting into the nitty gritty, and then do it, but make sure you're seeking assistance as you come up with some of these ideas or hear these ideas that, oh, I never thought about that,
Yeah.
And that's one advantage with working with a professional, is that, with us, we help clients retire every day, all year long, right? I mean, that's our job. Right. We see people retire and walk them through that process every single day. It's like going to a surgeon, right? I mean, they don't do just one of these a day. They do a lot, several a day, because that is their specialty. They do it day in and day out. So they know all the pitfalls and what could happen and how to plan for it and all the different factors that play into that.
Yeah.
So nothing wrong with do it yourself, but at least maybe get some advice on areas that you're realizing, oh, maybe it's not quite as easy as I thought.
Right. And I know we're getting sidetracked, but I think it's a great point of the conversation. So, talking about like a doctor and just doing and going to someone, a professional like yourself, if we go to do retirement, and we do it ourselves, it's the only one we're going to do, where you do them all day long. As you mentioned, I took my mom in to get cataracts. She's 79. She had her cataract removed. Mm-hmm. And place was like a factory. I mean, there were just tons of people in there, and they're going in, and she's like, I don't feel good about this. And I said, why? She's like, they're not spending enough time on this. They're just going so fast. And I was like, well, think about it. They do it every day so often. They've got it down to a system, if you will. And I said, they're doctors, obviously, and they've got technology in there. There's helping. And so when she finally went in and got it done, she was like, wow, that was really pretty easy, So I was like, it's the same concept of going and seeing an advisor. It's like, at first you're a little nervous, but then you're like, oh, wow, they actually have done this more than once.
Right. We know the pitfalls and how it all works, the different pieces, how they fit together. And, although your scenario might be a little different than the other person's, everyone's is. But the reality is everyone has the same pieces, right? Everyone's dealing with taxes. They've got money saved in different types of investments. They've got Social Security. I mean, those are common amongst everyone. You might have a pension, some do, some don't. That fits into, and all these different little factors and nuances that fit together.
Well, you've got the 10 or 12 or 15 different puzzle pieces that you're used to seeing every day from different people, but the sizes and the shapes are different for each person. And so it's how do you kind of get those to now play well together? That's the whole point
for their specific scenario.
For their scenario,
so what do you want to accomplish?
See, I told you were a genius after all.
That's right. Didn't even know it. All right. So one more on investing like a genius. So again, be flexible, be adaptable. 2, understand what you do know and what you don't know. And then finally, just the whole thing we've heard many times, geniuses learn from the experiences of others, so they kind of stand on the shoulders of the person before them to be even, further along. Obviously somebody like Elon Musk, for example, super smart guy, he's obviously a very big fan of Tesla and, named his company after him, for Christ's sakes, so you take what you have seen and you expand upon it. Again, the same idea, right? Right. Yeah. You can't and don't have to experience all of it yourself and learn from your own mistakes. I mean, hopefully you do learn from it, but there's enough people that have gone through these processes and experienced those mistakes, and I mean, I can give you client stories on it that, to help you understand this is the pros and cons of it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you just look, there's enough resources out there of here's the pros and cons and what could happen.
Right.
Learn from somebody else's mistake. Don't repeat it. Unless you just like learning that way, but it's generally not fun because you look back and say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. That was not a good idea.
There's enough life experiences that we want to have individually. You can hear somebody talk about it and you say, but yeah, I want to experience it for myself. I don't think falling flat in retirement is probably one of those, right?
No, not a good idea.
Definitely learn from somebody else. So there you go. So that's investing like a genius. That's some ways to think about that. And as always, we say on the podcast, before you take any action, folks, you should always check with a qualified professional before you do anything, whatever your scenario is, whatever your thought process is, whatever the idea is. Make sure you're running that past a qualified professional, because we talk in generalities, whether it's on this show or any other show you may watch. They're typically talking to a larger audience, and it may not be the best advice for you. So as always, follow up with a qualified professional. And if you want, you can go to Phil's website. You can learn more about Phil. You can get in contact with him. Go to philstaxhacks.com. That's philstaxhacks.com. And while you're there, you can submit an email question, and that's what I'm going to pull up here and do right now. We're going to take one from Leo. Where was Leo at? He was over in Plymouth. And he says, Phil, is it wise to have a trust as part of my financial and estate plan? A lot of people I know seem to have a trust, and I'm curious about it.
Yeah, trusts are pretty common in an estate plan, and it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, number one mistake I see with trust is people think it's a tax savings vehicle, and it isn't necessarily at all. In fact, it can cost not you, because you're probably gone at that point, but your estate a huge amount of tax from an income tax standpoint if it's not structured the right way. So usually at the end of the day, where a trust comes into play best is if you're trying to control how assets get passed. If you want some control on how your heirs that are going to receive the funds out of your estate spend it, when they spend it, those kind of factors, or if there's a special needs scenario, those are great places for a trust. But under today's current estate laws, a lot of times trusts just don't fit. They don't really, you don't need them. So, really, again, it comes down to understanding your specific scenario. Seek the advice of a professional. Kind of fits into what we were talking about. You don't want to go on the internet and pull up a trust because, again, trusts are very specific to states. We're in Michigan, so there's certain state laws that apply to Michigan.
Right.
That if you go pull a trust off the web somewhere, might have been written in Nevada. Nevada's laws are different than Michigan. Yep. So, and again, I'm not an attorney, not trying to give legal advice.
Right.
But you need to work with a professional to understand your scenario and does it fit.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, thanks, Leo. We appreciate the question. As always, again, if you'd like to submit your own, you can do so by going to philstaxhacks.com, and I'll have that pop up on the screen if you're watching in video form, philstaxhacks.com. And while you're there, subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Google or Spotify or whatever platform you choose. We make it really easy for you to find that. You can click on episodes. You can listen to past ones. There's lots of different ways. There's little timestamps, all sorts of cool things. If you're watching this on video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button that'll come up here and subscribe to us on YouTube or follow Phil on Facebook. And with that, we're going to get out of here this week. Phil, I appreciate your time as always, and I hope you have a great, safe, and sane week. And I'll see you soon. We'll talk to you next time, folks, here on Phil's Tax Hacks and Other Retirement Facts with Phil Putney, CPA and personal financial specialist at AFS Wealth Management. We'll see you next time.
Investment advisory services offered through AFS Wealth Management. The content of this program is provided for informational purposes only and is not a solicitation or recommendation of any investment strategy. Investments and/or investment strategies involve risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will achieve its objectives.